Welcome back to Infidelity Tales Lab. We're incredibly grateful for your support. Before we begin today's tale, tell us, which city or country are you joining us from? We love connecting with our global audience. Now let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Foundations of Trust. Clarence McClure gripped his coffee mug, watching his father Fred inspect the foundation of their latest construction project. The early morning sun illuminated the San Antonio worksite as his father's weathered hands traced the concrete lines. See this, son? Fred tapped the solid surface. A foundation isn't just about strength, it's about trust. These people are putting their lives in our hands. Young Clarence absorbed every word, the lesson embedding itself deep in his consciousness. That moment would shape his approach to life for decades to come. 20 years later, Clarence sat in his office at Austin Energy, reviewing quarterly reports with the same meticulous attention his father had shown to foundations. A photo of his parents sat on his desk, their proud smiles captured at his last promotion celebration. His colleague, Marcus Chun, poked his head through the doorway. "Hey, McClure, there's another position opening up in Houston. Triple the salary. You interested in throwing your hat in?" Clarence didn't even look up from his reports. "Thanks, Marcus, but I'm good here." "Man, that's the third offer you've turned down this year. You're crazy loyal. You know that?" "Stability matters more than money," Clarence replied, his fingers tracing the edge of his savings account statement. The one earmarked parents' new home. The numbers had grown steadily over 15 years. Each bonus, each overtime payment, each careful investment added another brick to the foundation of his dream. His parents had given him everything. Now it was his turn to provide for them. His phone buzzed with a text from Amy. "Don't forget the hospital gala tonight. Wearing blue tie to match my dress." Clarence smiled, remembering their first meeting at last year's gala. He'd been dragged there by Marcus, claiming he needed to network outside the energy sector. Instead, he'd found himself captivated by the pediatric nurse with kind eyes and a laugh that made others want to join in. That evening, Clarence adjusted his blue tie in the mirror, Amy's gentle hands smoothing his collar. "You clean up nice, Mr. McClure," she teased, her perfume carrying hints of lavender. "Learn from the best, Mrs. McClure," he replied, catching her hand and pressing a kiss to her palm. 2 years of marriage had only deepened his appreciation for her thoughtfulness and dedication to others. The gala buzzed with Austin's medical elite. Clarence observed Amy in her element, gracefully navigating between hospital board members and fellow nurses. Her natural ability to connect with people reminded him of his mother, Mildred. "Clarence?" Dr. Harrison, the chief of pediatrics, clapped him on the shoulder. "Your wife's been invaluable in restructuring our night shift rotations. You found yourself a keeper." "That I did," Clarence agreed, pride warming his chest as he watched Amy comfort a young patient's worried mother across the room. Later that week, Clarence sat with his parents in their cramped ranch house kitchen. The pipes groaned overhead, and his father's arthritis-stiffened fingers struggled with the coffee pot. "Mom, Dad, I've been thinking," Clarence began, pulling out a folder of housing brochures. "It's time for something more suitable. Something with better accessibility, modern amenities." "We can't afford," his father started, but Clarence cut him off gently. "I can. I've been saving for this since my first job. Let me do this for you." His mother's eyes welled with tears. "But it's too much, honey." "Nothing's too much for family," Clarence stated firmly, his voice carrying the same conviction his father had shown teaching him about foundations all those years ago. The house hunting process brought out the best in everyone. Amy threw herself into researching neighborhoods and school districts, claiming their future children would need good schools nearby. His mother and Amy spent weekends visiting open houses, returning with excited chatter about garden spaces and kitchen layouts. Clarence noticed Amy working more night shifts at the hospital, but he attributed it to her dedication to her patients. When she mentioned a new pediatric surgeon from Dallas, Dr. Leonard, joining their team, Clarence simply nodded, focused on comparing mortgage rates. The property on Maplewood Drive seemed perfect, single-story for his parents' mobility, spacious enough for family gatherings, and within their budget thanks to 15 years of careful saving. During the inspection, Clarence examined every detail with his father's taught precision. The foundation solid, the inspector confirmed, and Clarence felt the rightness of it all click into place. He didn't notice how Amy's phone buzzed more frequently during their evening meals. He dismissed the late-night hospital meetings that kept her away from their weekly family dinners. When she suggested handling the real estate paperwork herself, "You're so busy with work, honey," he saw it as thoughtful rather than calculating. The moving boxes piled up in his parents' ranch house as the closing date approached. Clarence spent weekends helping them sort through decades of memories, each item carefully wrapped and labeled. Amy begged off these sessions, citing hospital obligations. Dr. Leonard's implementing new protocols, she explained, adjusting her scrubs one morning. "We need all hands on deck." Clarence nodded, distracted by the contractor's latest update on the kitchen renovations. He missed the way her eyes slid away from his, the slight tension in her shoulders as she mentioned Leonard's name. The week before the housewarming party, Clarence worked late finalizing the last details. He'd hired the best caterer in Austin, wanting everything perfect for his parents' special day. When he finally arrived home, the house was dark and quiet, Amy's side of the bed cold and empty. A text message lit up his phone. "Emergency at hospital." "Don't wait up." He didn't question it. He didn't check the hospital parking lot to verify her car's presence. He didn't notice the faint scent of unfamiliar cologne when she slipped into bed hours later. The foundation he'd built his life upon was about to crumble, but Clarence McClure, ever focused on others' needs, never saw the cracks forming beneath his feet. Chapter 2. The Housewarming Revelation. The caterers arrived early on housewarming day, transforming the Maplewood Drive property into a showcase of sophistication. Clarence supervised the setup, ensuring everything met his exacting standards. Each detail represented years of planning and sacrifice, from the hand-selected wine collection to the custom-built entertainment system. "The flowers go in the Waterford vases," he instructed the staff, pointing to the crystal pieces Amy had chosen. "My wife has everything labeled for placement." Amy breezed through the kitchen, greeting the caterers with practiced charm. Her designer dress whispered against the tiles as she moved, checking place settings and adjusting decorations. Dr. Leonard confirmed he's coming, she mentioned casually, not meeting Clarence's eyes. "He's bringing that vintage Bordeaux you mentioned wanted to try." Clarence nodded absently, focused on directing the setup of the audio system. He missed the meaningful glance Amy exchanged with the catering manager, the way she touched the phone in her pocket like a talisman. Guests began arriving at 3, filling the house with congratulatory voices and exclamations of admiration. Clarence's parents held court in the living room, Mildred proudly showing off the custom cabinetry to her bridge club friends. "Such thoughtful choices," Raquel Phillips gushed, though her eyes darted nervously between Clarence and Amy. "You must be so proud of your children." Fred King beamed, clapping Dustin Leonard on the shoulder as the surgeon joined their group. "Some children exceed all expectations," he said pointedly, while Clarence stood across the room reviewing the catering schedule. Lucy George, who'd known Clarence since kindergarten, approached him with an oddly strained expression. "The house is beautiful," she said quietly. "You've always been so generous, Clarence. Maybe too generous sometimes." Before he could question her meaning, Fred called everyone to gather in the formal living room. Clarence moved to stand beside Amy, noting how she seemed to gravitate toward where Dustin Leonard waited near the fireplace. "We have an announcement," Fred declared, producing an envelope with the property deed. His hands trembled slightly, but his voice carried clearly through the room. "Mildred and I have been blessed with more support and love than we could have imagined." Clarence smiled, expecting his father to formally accept the house he'd worked so hard to provide. Instead, Fred turned toward Amy and Dustin. "Which is why we've decided this house should go to those who truly deserve it." The room tilted sideways as Amy stepped forward, accepting the deed with perfectly manicured fingers. Dustin's hand settled possessively on her shoulder, his evident in the calculated timing of the gesture. "These two have shown us what real commitment looks like," Fred continued, his words stabbing into Clarence's chest. "They've been there for us, understanding our needs when even our own son was too focused on his career." Mildred joined her husband, her voice carrying a note of righteous satisfaction. "You've been so absorbed in your work, Clarence. Amy and Dustin understand what building a real family means. The truth crashed through Clarence's carefully constructed world. They knew. His own parents had not only discovered Amy's affair, but had actively participated in this orchestrated betrayal. Guests shifted uncomfortably, their reactions revealing deeper knowledge. Raquel Phillips studied her shoes. Lucy George mumbled an excuse and fled the room. Even Deborah Elliott, his trusted colleague, seemed to shrink into the background. Amy addressed the stunned audience, her voice dripping false modesty. "We never intended things to happen this way," she said, exchanging a meaningful look with Dustin. "But sometimes love finds you in unexpected places." Clarence's mind raced through months of signs he'd ignored. Canceled date nights, mysterious phone calls, Amy's insistence on handling all communication with the real estate agent. The puzzle pieces clicked into place with brutal clarity, revealing a picture of calculated betrayal that extended far beyond a simple affair. His parents hadn't merely discovered the relationship. They had embraced it, actively conspiring to reward the couple who had systematically destroyed their family. The depth of their manipulation struck him like physical blows. Every family dinner had been an opportunity for observation, every shared confidence weaponized against him. Standing there, surrounded by people he'd trusted, something fundamental shifted in Clarence McClure's character. The pain of betrayal crystallized into something harder, colder, a resolve that burned away his former nature like acid through paper. Without a word, he turned and walked out of the house he'd sacrificed 15 years to build. But as he drove away, his mind wasn't clouded by emotion. Instead, it raced with precise calculations, mapping connections and vulnerabilities with the same attention to detail he'd once applied to building foundations. They thought they knew him, the dutiful son, the devoted husband, the predictable provider. They had no idea what he was capable of. They would learn. Chapter 3. The Seeds of Retribution. The neon sign above Joe's tavern buzzed and flickered, painting harsh shadows across Clarence McClure's face as he sat in a corner booth. The whiskey in his glass remained untouched, a prop in the performance he was about to begin. Willie Freeman slid into the booth across from him, his weathered face betraying no emotion. They'd grown up together in San Antonio, but while Clarence had pursued a corporate path, Willie had carved out a reputation as a private investigator whose discretion matched his effectiveness. "Tell me everything," Willie said, placing a small notebook on the table. "Start with the financials." Clarence's voice remained steady as he detailed Amy's recent banking activities. "She transferred our joint savings 2 weeks ago. Claimed it was for better money management." Willie's pen moved across the page. Classic asset protection behavior. "How much?" $350,000. Clarence's fingers tightened around his glass. "But that's not what interests me. I want to know about Dustin Leonard's real estate ventures." Willie raised an eyebrow. "The surgeon's been busy. Multiple properties purchased through shell companies in the last 6 months. Timing matches your wife's sudden interest in investment strategies." Their conversation paused as Edward Giles approached the table. The corporate attorney's expensive suit looked out of place in the dive bar, but his sharp eyes missed nothing as he assessed the situation. "I pulled Amy's employment records," Edward said without preamble, sliding a folder across the table. "She's been padding her hours, using her position to access confidential patient information. Specifically, data that could compromise Dustin's ex-wife's custody battle." Clarence absorbed this information with dangerous calm. "They're not just stealing my money and family. They're building ammunition against others." The night deepened as their network expanded. Bethany Edwards, a forensic accountant who had briefly dated Dustin during his residency, provided detailed analysis of his financial patterns. "He's systematic," Bethany explained, her fingers tracing spreadsheet columns. "Always maintains plausible deniability while exploiting hospital resources. I can show you exactly how he's done it." Susan Simpson, a nurse practitioner, added her own observations. "Amy's been poisoning the well for months. Every time you visited the hospital, she had a story ready about your controlling behavior or emotional distance. Staff started avoiding you before they ever met you." Clarence listened, each revelation stoking the cold fire of his resolve. The weekly family dinners, Amy's late-night shifts, the careful manipulation of his parents, all pieces of an orchestrated takeover of his life. Back in his temporary apartment, Clarence spread documents across his dining table. Willie's surveillance photos showed Amy and Dustin meeting in upscale restaurants, their body language intimate and comfortable. Text messages revealed their calculated approach to managing his parents' perception, complete with staged photos and fabricated stories. Sleep became a luxury he couldn't afford. Instead, Clarence built detailed timelines, cross-referencing dates and events. Each discovery revealed new layers of betrayal. Amy hadn't just fallen for another man. She had systematically worked to dismantle Clarence's entire world. His transformation accelerated during these dark hours. The man who had valued harmony above all else disappeared, replaced by someone far more dangerous. Years of managing multi-million-dollar energy projects had taught him how to identify and exploit weaknesses. Now he would apply those skills to a different kind of project. Edward's legal expertise proved invaluable as they constructed their strategy. They expect you to lash out emotionally, the attorney advised. That's why they staged the public humiliation. They're counting on you to make mistakes. They don't know me, Clarence replied, his voice carrying new steel. They never did. By week's end, his temporary apartment had become a war room. Timeline charts covered one wall, surveillance photos another. Willie and Edward made regular visits, helping refine strategies while ensuring plausible deniability. Your advantage is their arrogance, Willie pointed out. They think they've won. They won't expect you to be methodical about this. Clarence set clear boundaries for his revenge. No physical violence. No harm to innocent parties. Yet his definition of harm had shifted dramatically. The man who once prioritized others' comfort now understood that sometimes destruction was necessary for justice. His network grew stronger each day. Bethany's financial expertise complemented Susan's inside knowledge of hospital operations. Willie's investigative skills paired perfectly with Edward's legal strategies. Together, they formed a machine dedicated to one purpose: the complete dismantling of Amy and Dustin's carefully constructed world. Remember, Edward cautioned during one late-night strategy session, revenge is best served cold. We're not looking for quick satisfaction. We're aiming for complete victory. Clarence nodded, studying the complex web of relationships and vulnerabilities they'd mapped out. They thought I was weak because I chose to be kind, he said quietly. They're about to learn the difference between kindness and weakness. The first phase of his plan was already in motion. While Amy and Dustin celebrated their victory, Clarence was laying groundwork that would turn their own weapons against them. Each piece was carefully positioned, each move calculated for maximum impact. They had stolen his dream of providing for his parents. He would take everything they valued in return, not with violence or illegal acts, but through the same methodical dedication he'd once applied to building foundations. The man who emerged from those planning sessions bore little resemblance to the trusting husband who had saved for 15 years to buy his parents a home. That man had died in the living room on Maplewood Drive. What remained was someone far more dangerous, someone who understood that true power lay not in trust but in the ability to destroy it. Chapter 4. Strategic Maneuvers. Clarence sat in Edward Giles's downtown office, reviewing the stack of Shell Company documents spread across the mahogany desk. The corporate attorney's practiced eyes scanned each page with predatory focus. These are perfect, Edward said, setting down the final incorporation paper. Untraceable back to you, but completely legitimate on paper. Dustin won't know what hit him until it's too late. How soon can we start acquiring his properties? Clarence asked, his voice carrying the calm certainty of a man who had calculated odds and found them in his favor. First transfers can begin tomorrow. I've already positioned buyers. Edward pulled up a spreadsheet on his laptop. See these 3 commercial buildings? They're leveraged to the hilt. One good push, and his whole house of cards comes down. Willie Freeman entered, carrying a thick folder. Got something better. Bethany just sent over Dustin's complete billing records. Guy's been padding Medicare claims for years. Hospital board meetings next week, Clarence noted, his mind already mapping possibilities. Anonymous tip about billing irregularities might merit investigation. I can have Susan plant the seed with key administrators, Willie offered. She's got their trust. The plan unfurled. Within days, whispers about Dustin's questionable practices spread through hospital corridors. Susan Simpson orchestrated casual conversations in break rooms, letting choice details slip to the right ears. "Did you notice Dr. Leonard's patient referral patterns?" she asked innocently during lunch with Dr. Harrison. "Seems like an awful lot going through those specialty clinics he's invested in." Meanwhile, Clarence maintained his weekly visits to his parents, each interaction a masterclass in subtle manipulation. "I'm just worried about you both," he told them over coffee, his concern perfectly calibrated. "These investment properties Amy and Dustin keep pushing you toward. The market's unstable. Other doctors have lost millions on similar deals." His mother's hand trembled slightly as she set down her cup. "But Dustin says the returns are guaranteed." "Nothing's guaranteed in real estate," Clarence replied softly. "You might want to have an independent advisor review those contracts." The seed of doubt took root. He watched it grow in their eyes week by week. Amy's divorce filing landed exactly as predicted. Edward's response transformed her aggressive play into a tactical error, binding her with temporary agreements that separated her finances from Dustin's while appearing to give her everything she wanted. "Your wife's lawyers took the bait," Edward reported, satisfaction evident in his tone. "They're so focused on your assets, they didn't notice the restrictions we buried in Section 12. How long before she realizes she can't access Dustin's accounts? By then it won't matter. We'll have control of his entire portfolio." Dustin's desperation showed in his accelerated property acquisitions. Each purchase stretched his credit thinner, exactly as Clarence had planned. When 3 major deals collapsed due to unexpected financing issues, Clarence's shell companies stepped in as saviors. "Need bridge financing?" his representative asked Dustin's team. "We can close in 48 hours. The terms looked favorable on the surface. Buried in the fine print lay the mechanism for complete takeover once Dustin inevitably defaulted. Willie's network orchestrated a series of small disasters across Dustin's properties. Plumbing failures, electrical issues. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to generate insurance claims and tenant complaints. "Amazing how unreliable maintenance companies can be," Willie remarked dryly as they reviewed the damage reports. "Especially when they're booking multiple jobs on the same day." Clarence focused on the psychological warfare, using Susan and Bethany's intelligence to identify pressure points in the couple's social circle. Each revelation was timed for maximum impact. During a hospital fundraiser, he ensured Dustin's ex-wife accidentally encountered the board chairman. Her casual mention of Dustin's custody battle tactics sent ripples through the administration. Amy's attempts to maintain her social standing crumbled as carefully planted rumors took hold. Her country club membership committee received anonymous evidence of financial improprieties. Charity boards discovered conflicts of interest in her grant recommendations. When they tried fighting back with a restraining order, Clarence was ready. Edward demolished their allegations in court while using the publicity to highlight their pattern of false accusations. "Your Honor," Edward argued, "these claims are part of a documented pattern of retaliatory behavior by Mrs. McClure and Dr. Leonard. We've submitted evidence of similar false allegations against other parties who questioned their business practices." The judge's dismissal of their case marked another victory, but Clarence remained focused on the endgame. Each move led to the next, pieces falling into place. "They're getting desperate," Willie warned one evening at Joe's Tavern. "Desperate people make mistakes, but they also get dangerous." "Let them come," Clarence replied, his voice carrying absolute conviction. "Everything they try will only tighten the noose." His network grew stronger as others recognized the changing winds. Former colleagues who had distanced themselves quietly renewed contact, offering information and support. "Should we ease up?" Bethany asked during a strategy session. "They're already struggling." "No," Clarence stated firmly. "They chose this path when they betrayed everyone who trusted them. Now they'll see it through to the end." His ruthlessness carried purpose beyond mere revenge. Each action served to expose and dismantle the corrupt system Amy and Dustin had built, protecting future victims from similar predators. As spring approached, their defensive maneuvers grew increasingly frantic. Clarence watched with cold satisfaction as they exhausted themselves fighting shadows while his real attack struck from unexpected directions. The man who had once valued harmony above all else had transformed into something far more dangerous. A patient hunter who understood that true vengeance required not just destroying his enemies, but ensuring they could never rebuild from the ruins. Chapter 5: Escalation and Resistance. The morning sun had barely touched the Austin skyline when Clarence's phone buzzed with Willie's urgent message. Hospital board called emergency meeting. Amy and Dustin made their move. Inside the hospital's administrative offices, Clarence faced the assembled board members with calculated composure. Chief of Staff Dr. Morrison read from a prepared statement. These allegations of harassment and interference are extremely serious, Mr. McClure. We have multiple witnesses claiming you've been pressuring staff to fabricate complaints about Dr. Leonard and Nurse Parker. Interesting timing, Clarence replied, his voice steady. Just as your audit committee begins reviewing Dr. Leonard's billing practices. He placed a folder on the conference table. Since we're discussing ethics violations, you might want to examine these documents first. They detail how hospital resources were misused to gather private information about Dr. Leonard's custody case opponents. The board members exchanged uneasy glances. Dr. Morrison's face tightened as he scanned the evidence. Meanwhile, Bethany burst into Edward's office across town, clutching printouts of financial transactions. Dustin's liquidating everything through offshore accounts, she reported breathlessly. Millions moving through shell companies we didn't know about. Edward grabbed his phone. Willie, we need those transfer blocks now. Hit everything connected to their known accounts. Already on it, Willie replied. But they've got backup channels. Someone's been coaching them. Clarence absorbed the news without flinching. They've learned from watching us. Time to show them how amateurs differ from professionals. The counterattack accelerated when Amy's new attorney, Marlene McElroy, filed for emergency asset freezing. Your client has been systematically hiding marital assets, McElroy declared during the hearing. Her designer's suit and aggressive reputation meant to intimidate. We have evidence of plans to flee the country. Edward rose calmly. Your Honor, we welcome financial scrutiny of all parties, including Mrs. McClure's role in diverting hospital funds to support Dr. Leonard's real estate ventures. He produced documentation of Amy's unauthorized access to hospital accounts. McElroy's confidence wavered as she reviewed the papers. The professional consequences mounted swiftly. Austin Energy placed Clarence on administrative leave pending investigation of Amy's claims. Former colleagues avoided eye contact in hallways. We need distance until this resolves, Deborah Elliott told him apologetically. You understand it's nothing personal. Of course not, Clarence replied, his smile never reaching his eyes. Nothing about this is personal. Dustin struck next through the hospital's insurance department, triggering reviews of Clarence's past claims. The bureaucratic assault tied up resources and threatened access to ongoing treatment for his mother's arthritis. They're fighting dirty now, Willie observed during a strategy session. Getting at you through your parents again. Clarence's response was immediate. Call Bethany. Have her pull records of comparable claim reviews under Dustin's supervision. Let's see how well his decisions hold up to scrutiny. His network proved invaluable during the counteroffensive. Bethany risked her position to secure crucial documentation of Amy's misconduct. Susan organized nurses to testify about witnessing unethical practices. We've got your back, Susan assured him. They made enemies of the wrong people. Willie's financial contacts helped block Dustin's asset transfers, while Edward crafted a devastating response to the asset freeze attempt. Your motion opened the door, Edward explained to McElroy during negotiations. Now we get to examine everyone's finances. Still want to proceed? The strain began showing in small ways. Clarence snapped at a waiter who brought the wrong wine. Sleep became elusive, filled with dreams of endless courtroom battles. During one dark moment, the weight of it all nearly broke his resolve. Willie found him sitting alone in Joe's tavern, staring into an untouched whiskey. They're winning, Clarence muttered. Maybe I should walk away. Willie grabbed the glass away. Like hell. You think this is just about you now? They've hurt dozens of people with their schemes. You're fighting for all of them. The breakthrough came through understanding their fundamental weakness. While Amy and Dustin focused on attacking his public image, they failed to grasp the depth of his influence in Austin's professional community. Edward helped him activate long-dormant connections, former clients, retired executives, people who remembered favors done quietly over the years. These allies emerged from the shadows, applying pressure in unexpected ways. The anonymous tip about Dustin's fraudulent property sales came from deep within his own real estate network. The evidence revealed forged documents and hidden liens, triggering multiple regulatory investigations. As summer approached, their defensive resources stretched to breaking point. Amy's hospital position grew precarious as documented instances of misconduct piled up. Dustin's real estate empire teetered on collapse. Yet Clarence knew the final blow needed to strike deeper than financial ruin. It had to shatter the carefully constructed identities they'd built, exposing their true nature to everyone they'd deceived. His own personality continued evolving through the conflict. The cold fury that had driven his initial revenge gained focus, tempered by understanding that true power lay in rebuilding what they had destroyed. His network of allies had become something more, a force for positive change within Austin's professional community. They weren't just dismantling Amy and Dustin's schemes. They were creating safeguards to prevent future predators from following the same path. The endgame was approaching. Clarence reviewed his pieces on the board, each positioned with careful purpose. The time had come to spring the final trap, one that would ensure Amy and Dustin could never recover from their fall. Chapter 6. The Final Gambit. The Texas Medical Association conference room hummed with anticipation as Clarence approached the podium. His presentation on healthcare ethics had drawn an unusually large crowd, including Amy and Dustin seated near the back. Today we're examining how ethical breaches in medical practice often follow predictable patterns. He began, clicking to his first slide. Consider this case study. The screen displayed anonymized records of patient information access, billing irregularities, and resource misallocation. To most observers, it seemed like a typical academic analysis. But key audience members, armed with briefing packets Willie had distributed, recognized the familiar patterns. Notice how the perpetrators build networks of enablers, Clarence continued, his voice carrying authority born of intimate knowledge. They exploit trust while systematically undermining oversight systems. Amy shifted uncomfortably in her seat as more details emerged. Dustin's expression darkened with growing recognition. Across the hospital, Bethany and Susan's carefully timed revelations detonated like precision charges. Nurses presented documented evidence of Amy's misuse of confidential records. Administrators received proof of Dustin's systematic billing fraud. The board has no choice but to act, Dr. Morrison announced grimly during an emergency session. These violations demand immediate suspension of both licenses pending full investigation. Edward's team ensured the Texas Medical Board received complete documentation before Amy and Dustin could mount a defense. By afternoon, their medical careers lay in ruins. The financial coup struck simultaneously. Clarence's shell companies initiated coordinated sales of Dustin's properties to a hidden consortium of developers. Millions in equity vanished overnight, funneled into escrow accounts beyond their reach. "You can't do this," Dustin shouted during a futile attempt to block the transactions. "Those are my properties. Check the ownership documents," Edward replied calmly. "They haven't been yours for months." Clarence saved his most personal strike for a private meeting with his parents. In the familiar ranch house kitchen, he played recordings of Amy and Dustin plotting their manipulation. "They never loved you," he told Fred and Mildred gently. "You were just pieces in their game." His mother wept as she heard Amy's calculated discussion of how to manage their perceptions. His father's hands trembled reviewing financial documents, showing how family accounts had been drained. "We were such fools," Fred whispered. "Can you ever forgive us?" "That depends on what we build from here," Clarence answered truthfully. The final blow came through journalist Carrie Molina's devastating expose. Her article laid bare the full scope of Amy and Dustin's schemes, supported by whistleblower testimony and irrefutable documentation. Sources describe a systematic pattern of exploitation. The piece began targeting vulnerable patients and colleagues while building a fraudulent real estate empire. The story exploded across Texas media. Amy and Dustin's attempts at damage control only drew attention to additional evidence. Former patients came forward with new allegations, joining class action lawsuits Edward's firm had prepared. Their social destruction proved equally complete. Charity boards publicly severed ties. Country clubs revoked memberships. Former friends denied ever knowing them intimately. Attempts to rebuild careers in other states met coordinated resistance. Clarence's network ensured their reputation followed them, closing doors before they could open. Yet his true victory came in the aftermath. The foundation he established used settlement funds to help victims of medical fraud while promoting ethical oversight. His parents found purpose in warning others about manipulation tactics. The house on Maplewood Drive returned to its intended owners, transformed from a symbol of betrayal into a center for community healing. Fred and Mildred hosted support groups for families rebuilding trust after similar betrayals. Clarence emerged changed but unbroken. The ruthless strategist who had orchestrated Amy and Dustin's destruction gave way to someone more nuanced, a man who understood that true justice required both retribution and restoration. His network of allies remained, their bonds strengthened by shared purpose. Together they worked to reform systems that enabled predators like Amy and Dustin to flourish. The man who had once defined himself through trust and sacrifice found deeper strength in calculated action and strategic foresight. He would never again mistake kindness for weakness, nor forget that some betrayals could only be answered with complete destruction of those who caused them. Chapter 7. The Aftermath of Justice. Clarence sat at his usual corner booth in Joe's Tavern, studying reports from the Texas Medical Board's latest disciplinary hearing. The numbers on the pages painted a satisfying picture. Amy and Dustin's medical licenses permanently revoked, multiple civil suits gaining momentum, and their assets steadily being converted into victim restitution funds. Latest update from my contact at Dallas Memorial, Willie said, sliding into the booth. They tried applying there under different names. Board rejected them within hours of receiving their applications. Good. Clarence's voice carried the same steel that had driven his revenge campaign. Make sure Houston and San Antonio get the same information package. Edward joined them, his briefcase bulging with settlement documents. The Foundation's first grants go out next week. 10 victims of medical fraud, full compensation plus funds for ongoing treatment. What about the support groups? Clarence asked, thinking of the growing network of patients who had come forward. Susan's coordinating with 3 hospitals to provide meeting spaces, Edward replied. She's developed a comprehensive screening process for identifying similar fraud patterns. The transformation of the medical community exceeded even Clarence's calculated expectations. Hospital administrators across Texas scrambled to implement new oversight protocols, many directly copied from the guidelines he had helped develop through his experience dismantling Amy and Dustin's schemes. Mount Sinai called again, Willie mentioned. They want you to consult on their internal audit system. Schedule it, Clarence decided. But make sure they understand our terms. Full transparency, no protected parties. His parents' rehabilitation proved equally thorough. Fred and Mildred King had thrown themselves into elder advocacy work, turning their shame into a mission to protect others from similar manipulation. Your father's workshop last week had over 200 attendees, Bethany reported during their strategy meeting. 3 couples came forward afterward with stories nearly identical to yours. Send me their information, Clarence directed. The Foundation can help with legal costs if needed. The ripple effect spread beyond healthcare. Corporate leaders sought his counsel on ethics and accountability. His approach to systematic revenge had evolved into a template for exposing institutional corruption. Austin Energy's board wants to expand your role, Edward noted. They're creating a new division focused on corporate integrity. You'll have complete autonomy. Interesting. Clarence considered the possibilities. That could provide useful leverage for implementing wider reforms. His network of allies had grown into a formidable force for change. Willie's investigative skills now served multiple corporate clients. Bethany and Susan's healthcare consultancy attracted nationwide attention. Even Carrie Molina parlayed her expose into a successful career specializing in medical fraud investigations. "We're not just fixing one case anymore," Willie observed during a late-night strategy session. "We're changing entire systems." "That was always the goal," Clarence replied. Amy and Dustin were symptoms. The real disease was the culture that enabled them. His ruthlessness found new expression in policy reforms and accountability measures. Each new regulation, each oversight committee, each transparency requirement formed another barrier against future predators. "Some of the hospital board members think you're going too far," Susan reported. "Let them," Clarence said dismissively. "They can either adapt or find themselves exposed next." His foundation's influence grew steadily, its resources swelled by assets seized from Amy and Dustin's collapsing empire. Edward's careful management ensured maximum impact from investments. "Latest settlement just cleared," Edward announced. "Another $3 million for the Victim Compensation Fund." "Good." Clarence's satisfaction came not from the money, but from knowing his enemies' resources now served to protect their former victims. The weekly foundation meetings became a forum for identifying and targeting similar schemes across the medical industry. Clarence applied the same strategic precision that had destroyed Amy and Dustin to dismantling larger systems of fraud. "We've identified 3 more clinics using similar billing fraud patterns," Bethany reported. "Want us to start building cases?" "Immediately," Clarence directed. "Use the same approach we developed for Dustin's takedown. No warnings, no negotiations." His parents watched his transformation with a mixture of pride and lingering guilt. Their own journey from enablers to advocates helped rebuild trust, but Clarence never forgot the lessons of their betrayal. "You've created something remarkable," Fred told him during a foundation event. "We were so wrong about you." "Yes," Clarence agreed simply. "You were." The house on Maplewood Drive, now serving as the foundation's headquarters, stood as a monument to his victory. The space that should have been his parents' retirement home instead became a center for justice and retribution. "Another support group starts next week," Mildred reported. "These people need hope. They need justice," Clarence corrected. "Hope without accountability is worthless." His network continued expanding, drawing in professionals who shared his uncompromising standards. The weekly meetings at Joe's Tavern evolved into strategic planning sessions for identifying and exposing corruption across multiple industries. "We're making enemies," Willie warned. "Good," Clarence replied. "That means we're effective." The man who had once prioritized harmony above all else now understood that real change required confrontation. His revenge against Amy and Dustin had taught him the power of controlled destruction as a tool for rebuilding. Chapter 8. Personal Transformation. Clarence stood before the assembled board members of Austin Energy, his presence commanding absolute attention. The corporate responsibility initiative he proposed would remake the company's entire ethical framework. "These measures aren't suggestions," he stated flatly. "Either we implement comprehensive accountability systems, or I take my expertise elsewhere." The board chairman shifted uncomfortably. "Some of these requirements seem extreme." "Extreme situations demand extreme responses," Clarence countered. "Ask yourself why the prospect of total transparency makes you nervous." His reputation for ruthless integrity had spread far beyond Texas. Companies nationwide sought his guidance, then balked at the stringent requirements he demanded. Another consulting offer from Chicago, Edward reported during their morning briefing. Healthcare consortium wanting to preempt fraud investigations. "Send them our standard terms," Clarence directed. "No exceptions, no compromises." The therapy sessions he had initially attended for stress management evolved into a deeper exploration of power dynamics. Dr. Sarah Chun proved an unexpectedly valuable ally in refining his approach. "You've transformed personal pain into systemic change," she observed during one session. "But be careful not to lose yourself in the mission." "The mission is what I am now," Clarence replied. "The man I was died in that house on Maplewood Drive." His new understanding of influence manifested in unexpected ways. Rather than seeking control through force, he cultivated networks of shared interest and mutual accountability. "The hospital board is fighting the latest oversight provisions," Susan reported during their weekly meeting. Leak the audit results to Carrie, Clarence decided. Let public pressure do the work for us. The facade of perfection he had once maintained gave way to calculated authenticity. His public speaking engagements drew crowds precisely because he spoke openly about betrayal and systemic failure. People respond to your story, Willie noted after another successful conference. It gives them permission to confront their own experiences. They respond to results, Clarence corrected. Stories without consequences are just entertainment. His approach to relationships underwent similar evolution. The network of allies he had assembled during his revenge campaign became a foundation for genuine connection based on shared purposes and proven loyalty. Mount Sinai implementation team arrives next week, Bethany announced. Ready to run them through the standard protocols? Make them earn our trust, Clarence directed. Start with the audit requirements. The satisfaction of watching Amy and Dustin's continued downfall paled compared to the impact of his wider mission. Their attempts to rebuild careers in other states met coordinated resistance. They tried applying at a private clinic in Florida, Willie reported. Anonymous tips shut that down within hours. Make sure they understand why, Clarence instructed. This isn't just punishment, it's prevention. His foundation's work revealed patterns of exploitation across the healthcare industry. Each investigation built on lessons learned from exposing Amy and Dustin's schemes. 3 more whistleblowers came forward this week, Edwards said during their strategy session. Similar fraud patterns at different institutions. Start building cases, Clarence ordered. Use the same approach that worked before. No mercy for enablers. The morning runs through Austin's neighborhoods provided time for strategic planning rather than mere exercise. Each route took him past locations connected to his victory. The hospital, the properties he had seized, the house that sparked his transformation. His daily routine reflected his evolved priorities. Foundation work balanced corporate consulting. Mentoring sessions followed board meetings. Each activity served his broader mission of systematic change. You've created something unprecedented, Edward observed during a late dinner meeting. A complete framework for exposing and preventing institutional abuse. This is just the beginning, Clarence replied. The healthcare industry is one symptom. The disease runs deeper. His capacity for strategic thinking merged with hard-earned emotional intelligence. Experience had taught him that lasting change required understanding human motivations as well as system vulnerabilities. The new oversight committee is nervous about implementation, Susan reported. Good, Clarence nodded. Nervous people make fewer mistakes. Comfortable people get careless. The ruthlessness that had fueled his revenge found constructive expression in policy enforcement and accountability measures. His reputation for uncompromising standards attracted others committed to systemic change. Another hospital group requesting consultation, Willie announced. They've already agreed to our transparency requirements. Schedule the initial audit, Clarence directed. Let's see if they mean it. The man who had once prioritized others' needs now understood the power of strategic selfishness. His own well-being served the mission's success. Chapter 9. A New Beginning. 1 year after the housewarming party that shattered his world, Clarence reviewed final preparations for the Foundation's public launch. The renovated house on Maplewood Drive hummed with purposeful activity. Latest victim impact reports, Bethany said, placing a thick folder on his desk. 23 cases resolved. Full compensation secured. Good. What about the new support group structure? Susan's coordinating with 5 hospitals now. The screening protocols you designed are identifying fraud patterns we hadn't even considered. The transformation extended far beyond individual cases. Hospitals across Texas competed to demonstrate compliance with the Foundation's accountability standards. Mount Sinai's board approved the full oversight package, Edward reported. They're implementing all recommended protocols, including the whistleblower protections, Clarence confirmed. Absolutely. They've learned from watching what happened here. His parents had found unexpected purpose in their new roles. Fred's workshops on recognizing manipulation tactics drew increasing attendance. Mildred's support groups provided crucial healing spaces for fraud victims. Another couple came forward today, Fred mentioned during their weekly dinner. Their story, it was so similar to ours. The patterns don't change, Clarence replied. Only our response to them does. The network of allies he had assembled became a model for collaborative justice. Willie's investigative firm specialized in exposing healthcare fraud. Bethany and Susan's consultancy helped institutions prevent similar schemes. We've identified potential issues at 3 more clinics, Willie reported during their morning briefing. Want us to start building cases? Immediately. Use the standard protocols. No warnings, no negotiations. Carrie Molina's ongoing series on medical fraud drew national attention to systemic problems. Her latest article featured the Foundation's success in driving industry-wide reforms. The publicity's making some people nervous, Edward observed. Let them sweat, Clarence replied. Nervous people make better choices. His influence reached beyond healthcare into broader corporate ethics. Companies sought his guidance on implementing accountability measures, then discovered his uncompromising standards. Another consulting request from Chicago, Bethany noted. They're offering triple our usual rate. Send them the standard terms, Clarence directed. The price isn't negotiable. The principles are what matter. The weekly strategy sessions at Joe's Tavern evolved into planning meetings for expanding their impact. Each member of his network contributed specialized skills to their shared mission. We're not just fixing individual cases anymore, Willie observed. We're changing entire systems. That was always the goal, Clarence confirmed. Individual predators are symptoms. The real target is the culture that enables them. His approach to justice had evolved beyond personal revenge into systematic reform. Each new policy, each oversight committee, each transparency requirement formed another barrier against future exploitation. Some board members think these measures go too far, Susan reported. They can adapt or be exposed, Clarence stated flatly. There's no middle ground anymore. The Foundation's resources grew steadily, fueled by assets seized from corrupt practices they exposed. Edward's careful management ensured maximum impact from each investment. Latest settlement just cleared, Edward announced. Another $5 million for victim compensation. Good? Make sure it goes directly into program expansion. The satisfaction of watching Amy and Dustin's continued downfall pale compared to preventing similar predators from emerging. Their attempts to rebuild careers met coordinated resistance nationwide. They tried applying at a clinic in California, Willie reported. Anonymous tips shut that down immediately. Make sure they understand why, Clarence instructed. This isn't about them anymore. It's about protecting others. Looking toward the future, Clarence saw endless possibilities for expanding their impact. Each victory provided resources and lessons for the next campaign. We're making powerful enemies, Edward warned during a late strategy session. Good, Clarence replied. That means we're succeeding. The man who had emerged from betrayal had become something more dangerous than a mere victim seeking revenge. He had become a force for systematic change, turning personal pain into institutional transformation. His legacy would not be the destruction of 2 people who betrayed him, but the creation of systems to prevent countless others from suffering similar fates. The house on Maplewood Drive, once a symbol of lost trust, now stood as a monument to the power of turning betrayal into justice. Epilogue. 10 years later. The McClure Foundation headquarters dominated Austin's medical district, its modern glass facade reflecting the Texas sun. Inside his top-floor office, Clarence McClure reviewed quarterly reports showing the organization's expanding influence across North America. At 55, his hair had gained distinguished silver streaks, but his eyes retained their penetrating intensity. Latest numbers from the Fraud Prevention Division, Bethany Edwards announced, entering with a thick folder. Now the Foundation's chief financial officer, she had transformed from a valuable ally into an essential partner in their mission. We've prevented an estimated $2.8 billion in healthcare fraud this year alone. Break it down by region, Clarence directed, his voice carrying the same authoritative edge that had once orchestrated Amy and Dustin's downfall. I want to know where we need to focus next. The Foundation had evolved far beyond its origins as an instrument of revenge. With offices in 12 major cities and a staff of over 300, it had become the nation's leading organization for healthcare fraud prevention and patient advocacy. The house on Maplewood Drive, where the betrayal had unfolded, now served as a museum and training center for healthcare professionals studying ethical practices. Willie Freeman entered, tablet in hand. His private investigation firm had grown into a specialized agency working exclusively on healthcare fraud cases. "Got an interesting update about our old friends," he said, taking a seat. "Amy tried applying for a nursing license in Canada under a new name. System flagged her immediately." "And Dustin?" Clarence asked, though his tone suggested mere professional curiosity rather than personal interest. "Still in Arizona, working as a medical equipment sales rep, barely making ends meet. His last attempt at practicing medicine was 3 years ago in Mexico. Our contacts shut that down within days." The decade since their downfall had reduced Amy and Dustin to cautionary tales in medical ethics courses. Their attempts to rebuild their lives met consistent, calculated resistance. Not from active persecution, but from the systems and safeguards Clarence had established throughout the healthcare industry. Edward Giles, now managing partner at his law firm with a specialty division dedicated to medical fraud cases, joined them via video conference. "The Johnson-Wright bill passed the Senate," he reported. "Once signed, our oversight protocols will be mandatory for all federally funded healthcare facilities." This legislation represented years of careful lobbying and strategic relationship building. Clarence had transformed his understanding of revenge into something far more powerful, systematic change that would outlive any personal vendetta. "What about the international expansion?" Clarence asked. The foundation was preparing to open offices in London and Singapore. "Contracts are ready for review," Edward replied. "Local partners have already agreed to our transparency requirements." Susan Simpson, who had built the foundation's patient advocacy division into a powerful force for healthcare reform, arrived with updates from their latest initiative. 3 more hospital groups have adopted our full compliance package," she reported. "That puts us at 80% coverage of major medical centers nationwide." Their weekly strategy meetings, still held in the private room at Joe's Tavern despite their organization's growth, maintained the focused intensity that had characterized their original revenge planning sessions. The difference lay in scale. They now fought systemic corruption rather than personal betrayal. "Tell me about the new training program," Clarence directed. 200 healthcare administrators enrolled for the first session, Susan explained. "We're using case studies from our database to teach fraud recognition patterns." The database had grown to include thousands of cases, each meticulously documented. Amy and Dustin's story was just one entry now, though it remained required reading for all new Foundation employees. Carrie Molina, whose expose had helped bring down Amy and Dustin, had parlayed her investigation into a successful career specializing in healthcare corruption. Her latest book, Breaking the Code of Silence, Healthcare Fraud in America, devoted a chapter to the Foundation's origins and impact. "National Press is requesting another interview series," Willie mentioned. "They want to do a 10-year retrospective on the Foundation's influence." "Forward them to PR," Clarence replied. "But make sure they understand our conditions. This isn't about personalities, it's about results." His parents, Fred and Mildred King, had found purpose in their golden years through the Foundation's Elder Advocacy Program. Fred's workshops on recognizing manipulation in healthcare decisions reach thousands annually through online platforms. Mildred's support groups for families affected by medical fraud had expanded into a national network. Your father's latest seminar had over 5,000 virtual attendants, Bethany reported. The prevention strategies he developed have become standard training material. The transformation of his parents from unwitting accomplices to powerful advocates represented one of Clarence's most satisfying victories. They had rebuilt their relationship on a foundation of shared purpose rather than blind trust. Mom called earlier, Clarence mentioned. They're expanding the support group network into Canada. The Foundation's influence extended beyond direct healthcare oversight. Corporate leaders sought their guidance on establishing ethical frameworks and accountability systems. Clarence's experience in orchestrating complex revenge had evolved into expertise in institutional reform. Morgan Stanley's board approved our full compliance package, Edward announced. They're implementing it across their healthcare investment division. Good. Send them the standard monitoring protocols, Clarence directed. His standards remained as uncompromising as ever. The foundation's success attracted both allies and enemies. Industry leaders who resisted their reforms often found themselves facing the same methodical dismantling that had destroyed Amy and Dustin. Trinity Medical Group is fighting the new oversight requirements, Willie reported. Start the standard investigation process, Clarence ordered. Pull their complete financial records. Review all licensing documentation. Use the full protocol. His network had grown into a sophisticated operation capable of exposing corruption at any level. Each member brought specialized skills honed through years of collaborative justice. I've assigned our best forensic team, Bethany confirmed. If they're hiding anything, we'll find it. Personal relationships within the core group had deepened over the years. Willie's dry humor and Edward's analytical mind still complemented Clarence's strategic thinking. Bethany's financial expertise and Susan's healthcare knowledge created a formidable combination. Remember our first planning session? Willie asked during a rare moment of reflection. We thought we were just taking down 2 people. We were treating symptoms, Clarence replied. Now we're curing the disease. The Foundation's headquarters included a secure archive room, documenting their journey from revenge to reform. Amy and Dustin's case files sat alongside thousands of others, each representing lives impacted by healthcare fraud. Latest victim compensation figures, Bethany reported. We've helped recover over $12 billion in fraudulent charges since inception. These numbers reflected more than financial success. They represented lives protected, families supported, and systems reformed. The Foundation had transformed personal retribution into institutional justice. Looking toward the future, Clarence saw unlimited potential for expansion. The mechanisms he had created to destroy Amy and Dustin now served as tools for industry-wide reform. International healthcare groups are requesting our oversight protocols, Susan noted. They've seen the impact in North America. Send them the complete package, Clarence directed. Same standards, no exceptions. His reputation had evolved from wronged husband to respected reformer, though those who knew him best recognized that the same ruthless determination drove both roles. The difference lay in application. Personal revenge had become systematic change. The Foundation's model is being studied at major universities, Edward mentioned. They're teaching our methods in healthcare administration programs. This academic recognition validated their approach, but didn't define it. Clarence measured success in prevented fraud and protected patients rather than public accolades. The weekly Foundation meetings still ended with strategic planning sessions, now focused on identifying and eliminating systemic vulnerabilities rather than personal targets. 3 more hospital networks requesting our compliance certification, Susan reported. Full audits first, Clarence replied. They earn trust. We don't grant it. His personal life reflected similar evolution. The man who had once built his world around family trust now created systems based on verified accountability. His relationships, both professional and personal, followed strict protocols of demonstrated loyalty. You've built something remarkable, Willie observed during a rare, quiet moment at Joe's Tavern. Something that will outlast all of us. That was always the goal, Clarence replied. Personal revenge ends with its target. Systematic change continues forever. The Foundation's training center regularly hosted healthcare professionals studying their methods. Amy and Dustin's story served as a case study in how individual corruption indicated systemic failures. Another ethics class graduating next week, Susan noted. They've all passed our certification requirements. Good. Make sure they understand, this isn't about punishing individuals. It's about preventing exploitation. 10 years had transformed a husband's revenge into an instrument of industry-wide reform. The pain of betrayal had forged something far more powerful than mere retribution. The house on Maplewood Drive, where everything had begun, now symbolized this transformation. Its rooms, once meant for family gatherings, instead served to protect countless families from similar betrayals. Clarence's office displayed no photos from his previous life. The walls held maps showing the Foundation's expanding influence, charts tracking fraud prevention statistics, plans for future expansion. We're making a difference, Bethany observed, reviewing their latest impact reports. We're making change, Clarence corrected. Difference is temporary. Change is permanent. The man who had orchestrated the perfect revenge had created something far more significant, a legacy of systematic reform that would continue long after personal vendettas faded into history. As he looked out over Austin's medical district from his office window, Clarence reflected on the journey from that housewarming party to now. Amy and Dustin had thought they were destroying his life. Instead, they had unleashed something far more powerful, a force for institutional change that would reshape an entire industry. The Foundation's success proved that true revenge didn't end with personal destruction. It continued through systematic transformation, turning individual pain into collective protection. Clarence had not just avenged his betrayal. He had ensured that its lesson would serve generations to come. The setting sun painted Austin's skyline in shades of amber, but inside the Foundation's offices, work continued. Another case to investigate, another system to reform, another layer of protection to build. The mission that had begun with personal betrayal had become an eternal commitment to institutional justice. Clarence turned back to his desk, ready for the next challenge. The ruthless determination that had driven his revenge now served a greater purpose. He had transformed private pain into public power, personal betrayal into professional reform. The Foundation would continue growing, evolving, expanding its influence. But its core remained unchanged. The same relentless pursuit of justice that had once brought down two people now worked to reform entire systems. In the end, Amy and Dustin's betrayal had created something they never intended, an immovable force for healthcare reform, born from revenge but sustained by justice. Their attempt to destroy one man's life had instead spawned an organization that saved thousands of lives. Clarence picked up the latest report, already focusing on the next target, the next reform, the next victory. Personal revenge had satisfied his past, but systematic change would define his